So, in expressing my gratitude, I want to substantiate why I began by saying it can be done. Uruguay was able to confront one of the most powerful tobacco companies in the world, one of the world's most powerful transnational corporations. Despite this, we're working with reason, with arguments, but above all, with principles and defending the fundamental right that we human beings have, the right to life, the right to health. Uruguay achieved a historical milestone, which I believe we must know how to work with and take advantage of to continue advancing in the fight against tobacco, which in fact is a pandemic. Even in the context of the coronavirus, tobacco is the great pandemic, a great pandemic that kills people the most, the one that makes people sick all over the globe, the one that causes disabilities, and the one that creates serious and severe economic disorders, not only at the level of nations, but also at the level of families. My first point is that the results we obtained in Uruguay through our fight against tobacco, which was also an internal battle in our country, was thanks to victories over 3 or 4 lawsuits launched against us by the tobacco companies' branches at the national level. Although it is too early to measure favorable results in oncological terms, in cardiovascular terms, we did obtain a clear improvement as measured by PAHO when it relates to acute myocardial infarction, especially affecting young people and men. This is encouraging. It is very encouraging. But we were not exempt of collateral pressures coming from the tobacco industry and their efforts to introduce, for example, the consumption of electronic tobacco or electronic cigarettes, or pretending like a song of sirens that tobacco companies are working to produce improved tobacco products better than the previous ones. The first reflection then is we can make change happen. Let's work, let's seek to advance on these issues, and let's not be tempted by their illusions. Because when you look at it closely, all they aim for is to restore their business and make profit. Of course, is the reason why these tobacco industries were created in the first place. Secondly, perhaps more at the international level, the lawsuit we won at ICSID allowed to include a key clause in the investment protection treaties between countries, whether bilateral or multilateral, a clause that clearly establishes the exclusion within these investment protection mechanisms of investments that at any stage of the production process threaten and damages the health and life of our people. This seems to me to be one of the most important achievements of the policy we pursued. And thirdly, and finally, we became aware that those of us who work on this issue, that those of us who are convinced that what we are doing is right, that is, defending the life and health of our people, that we need to unite. Yes, organized civil society is a great strength in the implementation of the Framework Convention. Tobacco control policies and the fight against the tobacco industry's interference should not be the exclusive task of the governments in power and of academia and the scientific world, although they have a role to play, but it should also rely on the invaluable contribution of organized civil society, which is key in this very noble fight, which must be taken to its ultimate consequences. Therefore, while thanking you again for the opportunity to participate to the discussion, I would like to end my intervention with the same message I began with. It can be done. Of course, it can be done. If you can show my presentation, thank you very much for the invitation. It's fantastic to see many faces of many friends for many time. To this time, in this moment of pandemic, no one doubts of the role of health's role in the development process. Before the pandemic, we were talking about health on one side or economy on the other side. Now we we are sure that they cannot be separated. They all contribute to the development, the importance of people having good health. That's why how it relates to the sustainable development goals. You know, in order to prevent mortality caused by tobacco, it is included as a mean to obtain this goal, which is a goal number 3.A, in order to strengthen the framework convention on tobacco control. We have been supporting countries because we have been proposing the meeting of the COPE, Conference of Parties, the encounter of the parties, but because of the pandemic, we had to postpone it for 2021. In the context of the work uh, among the parties, we have adopted a global strategy to accelerate the implementation of the Framework Convention, and we are seeing that if we don't accelerate the rhythm of implementation, we are not going to confront and reach the goal of diminishing the impact of tobacco on health and diseases. This strategy responds to goal number 3 and relates to the Framework Convention in order to overcome the obstacles. The epidemics, the pandemic of tobacco kills many people, has an impact at the health level in all over the world. With as was Dr. Vasquez was mentioning, the companies, the tobacco companies, put their profits before any issues and concern of people's health. We've been suffering the interference of tobacco companies, and so we are implementing and proposing tools to limit the interference of those tobacco industry on health policies, and the parties have many tools to implement the framework convention, but still the interference of tobacco companies is a major obstacle. The Article 5.3 of the FCTC asks the parties to protect their health policies and the control of tobacco and limit the interference of tobacco industry. It gives guidelines to countries to what they should be pushing forward in order to implement consensual policies that have been discussed under the CFTC, and follow a series of recommendations that you can see on the screen. And one I want to emphasize is the necessity to denormalize and regulate the corporate social responsibility strategy, which is a way to market the products and interfere. As for the Article 13 of CFTC of WHO, they propose to prohibit the contributions from tobacco companies to any entities under the pretext of social responsible causes. And so when people receive those contributions, and when they publicize it, when they do some publicity about it, it's a way of interfering and having an incidence of health policies. How is the world today? The Article 5.3 is not necessarily the one is the most implemented, but when we talk about the framework, there are different tools in the framework that can be used and can be considered as good practices, like the guideline for public officers and public employees in relation to tobacco industry in the health department of the Australian government is example of good practices. In Myanmar, Philippines, Thailandia, among others, also have implemented very creative policies. And we have received some complaints about in some countries, like in United Kingdom, of countering tobacco industry activities. We also, in the context of the United Nations, there's a institutional task force to prevent and control of ENT. The executive secretary uh, is considered specifically of tackling the issues of tobacco. There's a model policy that can be used by many agencies at the United Nations level in order to implement concrete actions to control tobacco. There's nothing related to tobacco industry that is aligned with the spirit and policy in general of United Nations. So we have worked hard on those policies to align with the spirit of the Article 5.3 in order that the parties of the convention, in order to harmonize all those systems of the UN. There's also another tool like the Global Compact of the United Nations in order to that the tobacco industry will not be able to be members of that space. In 2017, and there are many associations that are supporting the tobacco industry, like the Chamber of Commerce at the international level, that are confronting and impeaching the development and implementation of many health policies. Uh, the TRICIT is another organization that basically defends the business interests of tobacco industry, and CEPAL, which works with children, and the tobacco industry has used this space to promote its products towards that targeted public. Here we see some of the instruments that the Secretary is offering to the parties. We have a center of knowledge, a knowledge hub, that responds to the Article 5.3, but also coordinates 3 observatories of monitoring in Brazil, in South Africa, and Sri Lanka. So these are some of the documents we have to implement the Article 5.3, and there's also a guideline document how we can conduct our activities towards tobacco control. We implement also a strategy, a communication plan to combat the tactics of the tobacco industry, and also a tool, education tool, which is online and that you can use, and it's already available online. Finally, we have a few other tools that we also have, and they will be available on the website. With this, that's all I wanted to share with you. So I want to thank you again for the invitation, and thank you. Thank you, Laura. Without doubt, the elaboration of this regional index on tobacco industry interference, it was a quite interesting exercise. It allowed us to give us an overview of what's the state of the art of the implementation of the policies in the countries and compared to the policy from 2007 and 2019. As mentioned to Laura, the interference is latent. It's very present, but there are some devices and tools and instruments. And next panelists will also share reflections on the tools and towards where we should go to shield ourselves on the interference of tobacco industry. I would like to identify a few points of the lines of strategies that the states can adopt in order to confront the strategy of tobacco industry. At the level of communication, it's fundamental to work on sensibilization, awareness, in order that that policies towards tobacco go further than just health policies. It also relates to governance and the relation and regulation of government. States must prioritize uh, to reject all alliances with the tobacco industry and limit all interaction with that industry, unless or have a relation that are really strictly needed for the implementation of the Article 5.3. Also, we need to strengthen the code of conduct. Sometimes there are none, or sometimes are not being implemented or weak. And finally, the issue of regulation of the tobacco industry, without doubt, we need to advance on the issue of information that we request to the industry with valid information that is true, evidenced, in order to denormalize all their corporate social responsibility campaigns that the tobacco industry is leading. Of course, it's an issue of debate, but the industry is using this mechanism, as it is shown by the report, to have an incident and interfere in the development of policy at the health public policy level. And this is observed in all countries. This being said, there's no perfect recipe, and we call for the commitment of all actors of government agencies, also with the civil society and multilateral agencies, and all actors that can be included in the agenda to fight against the tobacco control policies. Like was saying the Dr. Tavares Vasquez, it is possible. When we've systemized all the information of all 9 countries, thanks to the effort they've deployed in their countries, it's important now to give a consistent and permanent monitor how is developing itself and what are the strategies of the tobacco industry. And we need to do much more. We also need to strengthen the national and regional and international uh, strategies and convergence on the policies of taxes, of marketing and sponsorship, on corporate social responsibility. An issue that is key is to establish alliances with other agendas, like the agenda of human rights, that covers a universe that is very key, and we need to work hand in hand on with human rights defenders. So the last 3 challenges. One is to protect the policies and activities of tobacco control against all business interests that the industry is realizing to promote new tobacco products, emerging tobacco products. Uh, we have launched also a report which was trying to unmask uh, the activities of the industry, how the industry has reinforced and strengthened its tactics during the pandemic, thanks to a group in an alley in Mexico. In Argentina, as you know, Argentina is not a party of the Framework Convention. We hope that this webinar, Argentina, and call upon Argentina to strengthen their commitments. Of course, Argentina has been implementing, thanks to the support of civil society. We aligned with the Article 5.3 and the implementation of Framework Convention, but still, there's more that can be done. And finally, the ratification of the protocol for the elimination of illicit commerce of tobacco products. We need more countries to ratify this protocol because the interference of the tobacco industry has been centered, has been focusing to use the arguments of illicit trade to access to legislators and to strengthen the lobby activities and affecting and interfering in the development of public policies. I will end my intervention to repeating my acknowledgements and thank yous for inviting us. And we hope that discussion will be rich, and we call everyone for in strengthening the implementation of the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. Thanks. Thank you very much. I think we need to look at this as a unique system because we have initially here a problem that begins with the conscious awareness of the silent pandemic, as we call it, the pandemic of diseases related to tobacco, related to nutrition and size of life. It's related to model of development of consumption where people, while they take food or smoking a tobacco, they're consuming a status, a brand, a sense of belonging. So I think it's we need to raise awareness about that pandemic, and it goes forward silently, and it's even worse than the actual COVID-19 pandemic. Kills 1 million people each year. Each year they kill 1 million people, 112,000 each day of people being impacted and dying from cancer, for example. This is a very aggressive strategy of tobacco industry towards the people, and that really relates to the policies we're implementing and allowing them to act. The second point is that we need to identify that we are complicit with tobacco industries when we don't prohibit them. They transmit their goals and business model towards marketing, publicity, towards children. They use platforms like Facebook, Google, and target their victims. And sometimes they leading towards addictions among targeted populations. On the level of tobacco, nicotine are all addictive, and for this reason, we need to have a common focus. I've been working on the bill in Peru, in Argentina, when on the lobby act, and we've learned with each other that the industry is using the same tactics and and practices, campaigns of terrors that promotes their products and their business model. And so at the level of tobacco, the issue is complex. We observing in the countries in countries where we intervene the most, we have the most consumption. For the example, in the Commission of Agriculture, all employees that are there work hand in hand with the tobacco industry. Uh, so we need to prohibit the additive that really creates addiction among children. Tobacco industries are criminals, murderers, when we consider that they target children, young children. Uh, and this leads the addiction, the quick addiction of those youth. So this additive combines with nicotine, so the children gets addicted more quickly. Uh, so so we have a convergence of different situations that's really difficult to prohibit, and we promote policies to impeach that, to prohibit that, but we lost in a bill project, and we get inspired by the Australian model to implement that bill in order to also prohibit the use of cigarettes and tobacco products in public spaces and parks, in the streets. In a meeting where we invited the tobacco industry at the Commission of the Senate and with the director of WHO in Chile, how and denouncing the false solutions of the tobacco industry in their strategy to lower the consumption of tobacco. To the contrary, their tactics have been to raise the consumption. The case of Philip Morris was presented in the commission, and we prohibit them to participate in the commission. So I call on the parliamentarians in order to put forward the framework convention in order to make sure that the policymakers are not interfered in their efforts to control tobacco. I'm the promoter of a bill on those alternative tobacco products, electronic cigarettes and such, which is not regulated by the Framework Convention. But we do have medical studies that really outlines the dangers of those new tobacco products. When we promoted the bill here with a lot of academic and scientific support, we developed an international strategy with Uruguay, with Mexico, and we need to strengthen the alliances with civil society at the regional level, and because it's the biggest challenge, because I don't have any doubt that in against this system, we're facing the same culture, business culture, and we need to learn from each other in the small laboratories like Chile of driving forward some policy initiatives and share those at the regional level among our countries and reduce the consumption of tobacco among women and young adults and focus countries where they have the highest consumption among children, kids. We are fully available to collaborate in the initiative, and we need more support from the WHO and not stop talking about those diseases to be chronic transmissible diseases, but really we're facing a pandemic. It's a more cruel pandemic because it kills more people, and has been proved by its pseudo neuroscientific and marketing, which contributes tobacco like obesity, uh, doubles up the diseases. It's when combined with COVID, it raises the risk of dying, like obesity. So those are the most challenging democratic processes we need to push forward, and the level of risk is more prevalent in the most vulnerable and set aside population, poor population. We have low resources, so a measures pro equity, which is fundamental, and obviously we need to build alliances in this sense, is to focus those specific sectors of the population in order to contribute socially and economically to the well-being of our population. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for the introduction, and thank you to all organizers to invite me to participate in this event. I will try to establish linkages quickly, and there are very issues quite interesting on the role of companies, the concept of the fundamental human right related to tobacco industry. Andrea, I mentioned at the beginning the connection of the Agenda 2030 on sustainable development goals and our target, the tobacco industry, and how they relate and how it's being included in the Agenda 2030. It's important to say that we cannot achieve public policies if we do not regulate the interference of those private sectors on public policy. So that's a key objective, and that allows us to connect to human rights issues. The importance of framework convention and the ratification in the region, and it's important for countries to have not yet ratified to ratify, like Argentina, it comes to mind, and relate to the international law and national law. The relation between tobacco control and human rights, regulation, relation to non-visible disease and transmission, and human rights. One of the positive elements is that we focus on the necessity of states to implement prevention policies. Not only we raise the importance of health for the development of the economy and at all the levels of society, but the importance of preventions and transfer resources to prevent diseases and the prevalence of some diseases. With this connection, control of tobacco, regulation of interference of private actors, and dissemination and diseases. A few points on the trends that we've been observing globally and in Latin America as the protection of human rights. Many people that are participating in this webinar have been working on this human rights approach for years at the country level, but at the beginning, the connection to most, and most importantly, the traditional actors didn't see that clearly, that connection. In recent years, and I'll refer to a report of economic, social, and political rights published by the Commission of Human Rights on the violation of human rights. Maybe it's delicate about talking about corruption as related to issue, but when I read it, we can see that we can frame this as a typology of corruption, how the corporations are capturing the state and limiting their capacity of regulating and policy making. There's a general reference to corruption. The corruption phenomenon is being pushed forward by different private actors, corporations, and in this article, there's a specific reference uh, towards activities that can be legal, licit, but can be categorized as corruption. The traditional conception of corruption needs to be overcome because it's the same private actors that have the power to influence and interfere in the policy making. This has been quite evident at the level of control of tobacco. We have made many efforts to reduce this interference, this incidence, raising the transparency, minimize the access in the decision making and the designing of public policies. But nowadays, we know that they still hold a lot of power in order to protect their legitimacy in the society. So we need to denormalize this kind of interaction between the public spaces, public decision making, and the private sector of tobacco industry, because they are trying to reposition themselves as legitimate actors in society. And we've worked so many years on tobacco control. We have referenced many instruments. We can see that corporate social responsibility is now a tool for the industry to position themselves as a key stakeholder. The other issue that is to identify the relevance of their activities as a form of corruption, and how this has an impact on the guarantee of human rights. In all states in South America, where we have constitutional regimes that protect human rights and fundamental rights, to protect public policy, health policy, protect the population, and protect negative activities from the private sector. I want to link it to another report by the Inter-American Court on corporation and human rights, and it specifies how companies are having a key impact when they advance their interests. They are leading directly to the affectation of violation of human rights, and that has been clear in this report. 1 minute is left. With the last 20 seconds I have, is connect the issue, interference, corruption, and standards of the human rights system in the Americas, which is it's linked to the social corporate responsibility. We need to advance in impeaching this tool to be used by the industry as and make sure that the state and civil society is not the one to assume the cost of their activities. Transparency, human rights regulation as a corruption issue, and also lead to legal legal policies that can be brought forward. Hello to everyone. Effectively, I would like to present briefly the Ecuador's experience, specifically of the institutional committee on the tobacco control, and how to accelerate the implementation of the Framework Convention and also to combat the interference of tobacco industry in our country. In the index report on interference in the chapter on Ecuador, which was included, it is evidence that the tobacco industry is targeting government agencies outside of the health sector. Usually, the health sector has been leading ministries. Health ministry has been leading the work to tackle the impact of the tobacco on health of people. But the interference in our country is now being led outside of this sector uh, because public officers and leaders in other sectors are more vulnerable, and their strategy has even got to the level of presidency and vice presidency. And sectors that have been involved with the issue, in relation to the business, to the trade, to the industry, to tax, to customs, and especially the interference in the legislative assembly in the formulation of policies. Those are spaces of interference, new spaces by the tobacco industry. As a recommendation, we established the need of a national mechanism and coordination centers for the tobacco control. In Ecuador, this process is 1998 in a scenario of a political decision to support integrated approach with a family health and the prevention strategy. And this allows the creation of intersectoral committee that begins working in 1989, 30 years ago. This committee and its parties have been promoting and allowed the signature of Ecuador to as a party of the Framework Convention, and has activities to promote the information of the framework through the bill in 2011 and is recognized as the national coordination body for the control of tobacco, where converge many agencies of the state, the Ministry of Education, Ministry of Health, the Ministry of Defense, later Tourism Ministry, Human Rights Ministry, Social Development Ministries converge in that space. And in that council, that committee is also the importance of civil society organizations like the Ecuadorian Women's Association, environmental organization, NGOs, who are really leading many efforts throughout last decade, like advancing and implementing a policy towards marketing, graphics. Those are kind of elements that have been developed thanks to the participation of civil society. And I also to flag two elements that are basics, that are key for the space of participation. The community participation is key from civil society, allows for the vigilance and monitoring of the norms and the standards, like the labeling of foods, in the case of non-complying of the laws of tobacco policies, and it really becomes like a third party during the meetings between the state and the tobacco industry, like with the tobacco, like the food industry. So there's a multi-sectoral participation. It allows the participation of other sectors beyond health sector, because their input is also important, and also the participation of decentralized government at the third level, provincial governments, that, as we've seen during the pandemic, who have a key responsibility and a leadership, fundamental leadership in the field of public health. This bringing them, all those sectors together, has been working great. And when we had more resources in our state to promote this kind of diverse participation. Finally, I would like to express that the structures defined the structure of leading to a joint declaration and throughout the last year and the pandemic, taking advantage of the crisis of the coronavirus, the tobacco industry has tried to push modification or interfere on the contraband and illegal trade law. From the Legislative Assembly, we called upon the Health Ministry, the SILA, in formulating the expansion of bonds to tobacco industry to compensate the reduction of their sales because of illicit trade. Thanks to actions, intersectoral actions, and that national coordination mechanism with academia and scientific sector, we were able to push forward counterpower. From the point of view of civil society, from activist point of view, and other entities beyond state entities, we need to work in the intersectoral way, coordinating and strengthening other networks of national, regional, local, and international actors. Our experience is that only working together, uh, all the ones that are battling with the same objective, we can advance more effectively. Thank you. Hello to everyone. Greetings from Peru. Acknowledging first this important work, Dr. Luis Pinilla, Carlos, for this permanent battle against tobacco. The interference of the industry in blocking all initiatives that looks into protecting health. I've participating in many initiatives to tackle this issue. The first thing I would like to say is that the tobacco industry always has interfered and has enacted pressure towards policymaking and all policy towards controlling tobacco. But now they are using more subtle strategies, and sometimes it's hard to gather the evidences of what they're doing, and we have a lot of experience of what they are doing and how they involve third parties that are pushing tobacco industry interests, and eventually we identify them because they use the same language and defend the same interests. So we need to take this into account. 5,000 citizens lodge a complaint of non-constitutionality on tobacco. And how we're going to confront this and this complaint has been lodged by through to respond to industry interests. How we're going to face against that? So we've conformed the table on the illicit trade of tobacco. We have many authorities intervening in that space, customs, borders. How we going to act on illicit trade of tobacco
as if it was an important national policy. But then in those spaces, the industry is quite present and interact with presidents, commission presidents, and public officers. In, on one side, we need to prohibit the sale of cigarettes. In our law, there's a vacuum on this on the marketplace. In the small business in all neighborhoods, and those are the points of where there are major contacts with consumers and where tobacco industry is implementing a strong marketing strategy. And in those neighborhoods, the poorest neighborhoods, they are the most vulnerable to those tactics and consuming a lot. Throughout many years trying to block. We were in the last session of the parliament. We had gathered all the votes to support this project of law, and the representative of the health commission said, I would like to take a break. uh, I will correct the paper, the bill, and never came back to the assembly. He left the assembly room and never came back. And we put some posters. That was 4 or 5 years ago. What happened here? So there's a key interference, clear interference, insulting, sometimes subterraneous. Sometimes they go through the association of bogaderos, like we work with Senator Girardi on those systems, the association of storage halls, and have come to us, and they are key promoters of that business. We are facing also activities of lobbyists that are visiting us every now and then to contract of that Bill 28. To counter all initiatives of policy control, tobacco control. So we're working on an initiative to enhance the legislation. It's a proposal that we are preparing. First, to prohibit the use of tobacco and electronic cigarette, which is a new trend, but it's not integrated in the legislation. So we need to update that legislation. Also, the use of cigarette and tobacco in public spaces, also at the level of border transit. And so there are some loopholes at the borders. We're also working on the neutral branding, how to make sure that there's this product is killing. How we can allow such publicity? There shouldn't be any publicity allowed. So we are tackling this issue of neutrality in publicity, and on the branding, on the packages. Also prohibit the production of electronic cigarettes with flavors because it's an incentive to consume, and make sure that we have publicity to make sure that people are conscious that this product is killing people. In all the informal sector and all the storage associations and stuff are, we need to limit and establish standards to prohibit circulation of tobacco towards children population. uh, linked to the junk food industry, we need to bridge the approach we are facing uh, 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 junk food industry that is also capturing spaces of decision making. They have the capacity to invest those spaces. We need to regulate this uh, tendency of trying to participate in decision making spaces. Thank you. Thank you so much for inviting me for the launching of this index. It's a pleasure to see you all. The Framework Convention on Tobacco Control stresses in its preamble the special contribution made to tobacco control activities at the national and international levels by NGOs and other members of civil society not affiliated with the tobacco industry, including bodies of the health professions, associations of women, of the youth, of environmental and consumer advocates, and of education and healthcare institutions. And it highlights the crucial importance of their participation in national and international tobacco control activities. This has been determined in the basic principle of the FCTC by the introduction of Article 4.7, which states that the participation of civil society is essential to achieve the objectives of the convention and its protocols. Uh, on the basis that they don't have a relation with tobacco industry. Other FCTC article also mentioned civil society participation, like mentioned by Adrian Blanco. And this is key for the implementation of Article 5.3 at all level, at the national, regional, municipal levels. But in order to put ourselves on interference uh, in facing the interference of the tobacco industry, we need to implement the implementation of Article 5.3. There are 6 points that can demonstrate the importance of civil society. 1.1, civil society generates information. The Regional Tobacco Industry Interference Index is a demonstration of civil society's capacity to generate data and information. The panelists in this webinar are living proof of the capacity of non-governmental organization to converge around the issue that needs to be documented and expose tobacco industry interference in public health policy. It is important to highlight the unique role of universities, academia, scientific institutions, and health professional societies. Last week, scientists from the STOP initiative published a very interesting article in a well-known newspaper about the tobacco industry lobby at the sixth meeting of the Conference of Parties to the treaty. Point two, civil society collaborates in the regional and global monitoring of tobacco industry strategies, exchanging information as a means to strengthen the implementation of Article 5.3. An example of this type of contribution is the observatories for monitoring tobacco industry strategies. They exist in Sri Lanka, in South Africa, and Brazil. In Brazil, the Center for Studies on Tobacco and Health has a very relevant project, and they collect information in developing country and tobacco producing country where the tobacco industry has an additional entry point to interfere with public policies. Third point, civil society strengthens political action and strengthens the independence, and they generate factors of policy implementation of Article 5.3. They advance a recent example has been the mobilization of NGOs against the incentives and financing financial support to the tobacco industry
at the International Labor and Organization General Assembly. At the national level, our public health body, our public health bodies find support from civil society, which helps them counter tobacco industry interference. We have heard the stories of Peru, Uruguay, Chile, and Ecuador. In Brazil, the Health Promotion Alliance has played a key role in supporting laws and regulations, as well as countering the tobacco industry's lobby. Point four, civil society offers financial and technical assistance in implementation of Article 5.3. We have the example of philanthropies such as Bloomberg and Gates that provide essential financial and technical resources to support the process and help governments and societies in the fight against industry by ensuring priority in health promotion actions. Point five, civil society provides support to countries in policy implementation. This includes developing and implementing cross-sectoral tobacco control programs and strategies. They work hand in hand with governments and other stakeholders. The examples include non-governmental groups that act as observers of the COPs, of the treaty. They work with the Secretariat and with governments and other non-governmental groups. At the national level, intersectoral commissions drive tobacco control program to a greater extent. Sixth and last point, civil society coordinates and catalyzes the work of civil society's own coalitions to expand monitoring and responses to the tobacco industry's deceptive strategies. There are many civil society entities working in the region that establish and coordinate national, regional, and international coalitions. I believe that in addition to the example I mentioned, there are many more areas where civil society is active, but it is of transcendental importance to value their work, to finance their actions, and to involve their members in tobacco control initiatives at all levels. I believe these are the challenges that need to be prioritized on tobacco control agendas. I would like also to take this opportunity to congratulate corporate accountability and STOP for their leadership in implementing Article 5.3 and producing the 2020 Regional Index. Thank you. Thank you, Salva. Thank you very much to the organizers. Congratulations for this new index. Thanks to all panelists and participants. Yes, I will try to do a synthesis in as briefly as possible, but I'll start with what has been flagged by Dr. Tabaré Vázquez, and that we are facing a pandemic sustainable over time, and that has been said also by Senator Girardi. And how about the president and the senator, and also the ex deputy? They said how the tobacco industry challenges and interferes on many ways with using legal tools like the case of Philip Morris in Uruguay, but also other instruments with different actions they're pushing forward. The President Vasquez, they call a chant of sirens in uh, qualifies those activities as chant of sirens, and he signals and flags that are in illusions, and they are aiming at protecting their benefits and their business and profit. Also, it's to flag that civil society or organized civil society needs to unite and keep working on the issue. Dr. Blanco also identifies the need to relate and link health and economy, and it's been clear in the context of the pandemic. Let's remind that there's a global strategy uh, adopted by the parties of the Framework Convention, and in order to confront this strategy, we need to protect ourselves from the tobacco industry interference, which is still one of the main obstacles for the implementation of the convention. One of the forms is to denormalize the corporate social responsibility instrument that the industry uses. Article 5.3 uh, 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 is less involved in as what relates to this CSR, corporate social responsibility. We've been referred to this index. It's important that you read it, download it, because we highlight in 9 countries uh, the the recommendation and the measures that the countries could need to take on governments and also on the regulation and also related to corporate social responsibility, restriction, and transparency, because when there's more transparency, there's less interference. And what can be put forward without still pending issues that has been a contribution of Laura and Danielle. Senator Girardi, he said that the tobacco issue is part of a broader picture that relates to consumption, to a sense of belonging, and so we need to adopt a holistic approach and with to face this pandemic, which is more aggressive than COVID and kills more people for non-transmissible disease. Uh, Oscar Cabrera reminds us the relation between human rights and Agenda 2030 and the linkage with the battle against tobacco. And for this, we need to reduce the interference of tobacco industry. He identifies different instruments, the UN report on corruption and human rights, and he insists in reminding that the actions of the industry, tobacco industry, is corruption. They're using the pandemic to legitimize themselves. In Ecuador, the representative shares the experience of Ecuador and adds up a new element: the need for national coordination bodies, intersectoral and multisectoral, in order to implement correctly the Article 5.3 of the convention, citing the experience of Peru, shared by the other panelists, how third parties or facade groups are using those spaces to interfere, and from economic groups that are not related to health in spaces of other ministries than health ministry. So, and obviously, the last speaker talked about the role of civil society, and I'm now active in that space. The role of civil society is key, and today's document represents the essence of civil society, organized civil society. The report today that is launched is a proof of this important contribution. That's that's my synthesis. Thank you so much.
A indústria do tabaco superestima números do mercado ilegal de cigarros e tenta influenciar o governo para reduzir
in Brazil, the tobacco industry overestimates the number of the illegal cigarette market and tries to influence the government to reduce taxes and implement other tobacco control and prevention measures. In addition, in the tobacco producing region, they make alliances with government agencies and try to influence decisions at the local and national level. Transparency is needed in any type of government relationship with these companies to avoid any conflict of interest. It is also necessary to move forward in sustainable measures for the promotion of crop diversification, as well as for the protection of Brazilian population health. No to the tobacco industry's interference. Hello, I'm Dr. Cavalan, coordinator of the NTG Alliance, and we want to tell you that Chile has had a bad score in the report on the interference of the tobacco industry on the implementation of public policies and laws that allow to reduce the number of tobacco users. With such policies, we can prevent chronic non-communicable diseases, the true epidemic of the 21st century, that is cardiovascular or respiratory diseases, diabetes, and cancer. We call for the authority to strengthen and more vigorously enforce laws such as the lobbying law so that we can all say no to the tobacco industry's interference. In Colombia, the tobacco industry permanently interferes in the discussion of laws in the Congress of the Republic that seek to advance the implementation of the measures established in the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. For this reason, we call on the national government to adopt effective public policies and regulate Article 5.3 of the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. No to tobacco industry interference. In Costa Rica, the tobacco industry permanently interferes in the mixed commission against illicit trade. We can't allow facade people to make decisions in government commissions. Renata calls on the government to establish policies that strengthen the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. Renata says no to the tobacco industry interference. In Ecuador, the tobacco industry has established agreements and supported campaigns related to tobacco control by government institutions. In addition, it has organized forums and events to which public officials are invited. In the same way, first-level authorities attend the inaugural events. It is important to protect public policies on tobacco control from interference by the tobacco industry. For the health and life of Ecuadorians, no to tobacco interference. In Mexico, the tobacco industry builds legislative processes in Congress. It hires former officials and makes alliances with some legislators. No to tobacco interference. In Peru, the tobacco industry is relentlessly obstructing tobacco control laws. We call on the government to implement Article 5.3 of the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control to protect the public health of our citizens. Hashtag no to tobacco interference. In Uruguay, the tobacco industry financed part of the electoral campaign of some parties. In addition, the data on its activity as a company is not public. We demand that an open data policy be implemented, and also we specifically ask the government and political parties to comply with the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. No to tobacco interference. I believe that some of you couldn't listen to Marita from Argentina. While I ask you to open up, everyone to open their videos to take a picture, I would like to ask Daniel to reset the video so we can hear Marita. So as I was saying, I would like to everyone to turn on their video so we can take a collective picture. And I'm sorry about the technical issues we may have faced. Again, on behalf of Corporate Accountability and the STOP program, thank you very much for your valuable support in making the index and this event possible. With this, let me conclude this meeting, but not before reminding that every question asked will be answered in a timely manner, and also calling on all participants to kindly spread this valuable information, this index, which proved once again that the tobacco industry does not give up. Thank you very much and have a great day. And I leave you with the intervention of the representative of Argentina. Argentina is the only state among the countries that make up the regional index and one of the few in the world that has not yet ratified the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. The main obstacle is the interference of the tobacco industry and the alliances with facade groups. In this way, Argentina is left out of global policy decisions to address the tobacco epidemic and guarantee the right to health of the entire population. That is why FIC Argentina is asking the state to ratify the convention in order for us to have more tools to confront the tobacco industry's lobby in our country. In Argentina, we say no to tobacco interference. In Brazil, the tobacco industry overestimates the number of the illegal cigarette market and tries to influence the government to reduce taxes and not implement other tobacco control and prevention measures. In addition, in the tobacco producing region, they make alliances with government agencies and try to influence decisions at the local and national level. Transparency is needed in any type of government relationship with these companies to avoid any conflict of interest. It is also necessary to move forward in sustainable measures for the promotion of crop diversification as well as for the protection of Brazilian population health. No to the tobacco industry's interference. Hello, I'm Dr. Corvalan, coordinator of the ENT Chile Alliance, and we want to tell you that Chile has had a bad score in the report on the interference of the tobacco industry on the implementation of public policies and laws that allow to reduce the number of tobacco users. With such policies, we can prevent chronic non-communicable diseases, the true epidemic of the 21st century, that is cardiovascular or respiratory diseases, diabetes, and cancer. We call for the authority to strengthen and more vigorously enforce laws, such as the lobbying law, so that we can all say no to the tobacco industry's interference. In Colombia, the tobacco industry permanently interferes in the discussion of laws in the Congress of the Republic that seek to advance the implementation of the measures established in the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. For this reason, we call on the national government to adopt effective public policies and regulate Article 5.3 of the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. No to tobacco industry interference. In Costa Rica, the tobacco industry permanently interferes in the mixed commission against illicit trade. We cannot allow facade people to make decisions in government commissions. Renata calls on the government to establish policies that strengthen the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. Renata says no to the tobacco industry's interference. In Ecuador, the tobacco industry has established agreements and supported campaigns related to tobacco control by government institutions. In addition, it has organized forums and events to which public officials are invited. In the same way, first-level authorities attend the inaugural events. It is important to protect public policies on tobacco control from interference by the tobacco industry. For the health and life of Ecuadorians, no to tobacco interference. In Mexico, the tobacco industry builds legislative processes in Congress. It hires former officials and makes alliances with some legislators. No to tobacco interference. In Peru, the tobacco industry is relentlessly obstructing tobacco control laws. We call on the government to implement Article 5.3 of the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control to protect the public health of our citizens. Hashtag no to tobacco interference. In Uruguay, the tobacco industry finances part of the electoral campaign of some parties. In addition, the data on its activity as a company is not public. We demand that an open data policy be implemented, and also we specifically ask the government and political parties to comply with the Framework Convention on Tobacco Control. No to tobacco interference.